Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my final matchday 3 team selection, and the biggest thing of course is that I am using the Limitless chip this week, and as planned of course going to wildcard in matchday 5 because we have a effective wildcard as well in matchday 4. The whole idea in matchday 4 is I'm probably just going to go for players even if I think that they'll get knocked out. That will sort of be the upside in matchday 4, and hopefully in matchday 5 I can completely rectify it depending on the upsets that we get, or depending on obviously whatever outcomes have happened, any injuries that have happened as well. So that's the strategy that I'm going for, locking in with the Limitless. Now, I did post a Limitless draft yesterday, but I have made some changes, and that's because Portugal, as expected, did beat Turkey, and that sort of locks them within first in their group. I don't really think that there's too much chance that I'll understand what the Portuguese lineup will be. Unfortunately, they play very late, and for that reason, I've removed Portuguese players from my draft. The two players that I highly considered were, first of all, Diogo Dalot and Pedro Neto, because in my opinion, it's actually a lot harder to fit Diogo Jota into the draft. He's a forward player, and I really found it very hard to remove any of the elite forwards within the game in place of someone like Jota. And that's simply, where I landed upon with my decision making. If you guys have been enjoying the content so far, I just want to shout out all the people who have subscribed, but there's still 50% of you who've been watching the videos who are still unsubscribed. If you're enjoying the content so far for the Euros and you're also looking forward to potentially even more future FPL content, drop a subscribe and help support the channel out. Thank you guys so much. Starting with the defense with the Limitless draft, we're going to go with some pretty big changes. The main change, unfortunately, is DeMarco is injured. So we got some reports that unfortunately he's already missed 2 days of training with Italy, and I can't really take the punt. It's already a pretty tough fixture. It is Croatia. Both teams have something to play for. Croatia even more so, given the sort of precarious position that they have within their group. Now, obviously, Italy needs to effectively look to draw or win this game, because if Croatia win, of course, that sort of throws things into a huge spanner, of course. And the same thing goes with Albania, who fortunately got a draw versus Croatia. So that group is still live, and even though I'd like to get an Italian player, unfortunately I've dropped all the Italians from my draft. What I have gone with instead is Trippier. The news on show is very bad. It seems like Trippier is going to start once again in that left back position. What I think is nice about Trippier is first of all, Trent seems like he's probably going to be dropped for match day 3. I think that's my understanding at least. The experiment obviously for Southgate hasn't worked so far, so I really do think that Trippier is going to be on a lot more set pieces than we've seen previously. So that means corners and things like that. So routes to getting potential assists versus Slovenia. So I like to take the Trippier punt here. Guehi, of course, is a great option. Pickford is a great option as well. I am going to triple up on England, and I just thought that it would be interesting to go with the differential at this point in time because I'm just on a Limitless. I don't really have any reason to necessarily keep Trippier beyond this stage. I just like the punt. Theo Hernandez for me remains still the most interesting French option. I've gone for him as well as an attacking fullback. Of course, when you look at the French national team, Upamecano and Saliba, they've both had games where they've dominated a little bit more on the ball. But really, I think Theo Hernandez within match day 1, when he was able to play alongside Mbappe and sort of make overlapping runs with each other, with sometimes Mbappe dropping into the midfield, Theo Hernandez going on the overlap. I really liked how attacking he was there. Clearly, within the Dutch game, he was nowhere near as attacking, but I really think looking at Poland in the first 2 games, they still remain to be a team that is definitely something that you can hit on the counter, on the attack. So I do really like Theo Hernandez as the attacking punt. And the other sort of superstar fullback that I have within my team is Grimaldo. Grimaldo is someone who, once again, has a good fixture. He is versus Albania. I really do think Spain will rotate. Now, the news in Spain, the most up-to-date news is, unfortunately, Ayose Perez has an injury. So he's going to be out for match day 3. And I think Nacho was confirmed in training to, unfortunately, have been missing training because of a knock. So I really think that Laporte might actually play instead of Nacho. But beyond that, those two sort of changes, I really think that we're going to see full rotation for Spain. So the only players that I really like from Spain are so far Oyarzabal, Ferran Torres, and Grimaldo. The other positions, in my opinion, are still a little bit uncertain, and I don't really like the punts. I do think we'll play David Raya as well, so if you like a goalkeeper punt, I suppose Raya is that sort of player. But I've gone with Grimaldo here instead. Mela and Van Dijk are my 2 differentials that I think will sort of separate from the rest of the pack and how people will go. I like Dumfries a lot, but I still think that when I was watching him play with Frimpong, unfortunately, it seemed like his positioning was a lot more muted. And part of that might just be a symptom of just playing versus France, a much stronger team. maybe versus Austria, who honestly have looked very good within this tournament. I would be a little bit more concerned about the Dutch. Clearly, of course, that's been reflected within the clean sheet odds. It's much worse for Mela and Van Dijk here. But these are both players who, in my opinion, have very good attacking dividends. Van Dijk, as a sort of leading aerial threat within the Euros, obviously, and also taking a lot of set pieces when Depay is out is interesting too. So that's going to be something that I'm looking forward to. With Mela, in my opinion, he's going to start here versus Serbia. I think that the minutes are strong for Mela now. He obviously has sort of reacclimated back into the team, probably shrugged off that sort of injury, and this is a must-win game for Denmark. And the reason why I've gone for Mela is because, first of all, the historic sort of national stats for him are just amazing. And I am sort of trusting the fact that this is a great game, potentially both teams to score still, but one where Mela will get actively involved. He was actually someone who got 6 ball recoveries versus England, so he had a very good match overall. And I'm hoping, of course, to see more from Mela on the attacking front versus a slightly weaker defensive team, of course, compared to, let's say, England per se. And that's going to be the 5 defenders I'm going with. No Belgian defenders, unfortunately, because I really do think that Ukraine are quite a good attacking team. And of course, even though they haven't necessarily shown it through both the games, clearly, of course, not being able to score versus Romania, but then actually having a good performance overall, particularly within the second half, just makes me think, versus Slovakia at least, that we're going to see potentially Belgium losing their clean sheets. But we'll talk about the other Belgian players I have in my team later on. Now, in terms of the goalkeepers, I actually had a tough time with this. Because I've gone for Trippier, it sort of blocked me off from Pickford because of some of the attackers that I've gone for. So therefore, Pickford was closed away from me. Diogo Costa as well. I have seen sometimes that managers like to rotate a goalkeeper just for one match, particularly if the match is a little bit of a dead rubber match, which is the situation here for Portugal. So I do think that because they have some capable players like Rui Patricio, for example, that maybe he'll get one start here, a little bit of a miscellaneous start. We've seen that happen before. For example, Deschamps once benched Lloris for a matchday 3 game as well in a previous group stage match. I think it could happen here, but I do think, of course, the clean sheet odds are going towards Portugal's favor and also England. But once again, because Portugal don't necessarily have something to play for, I don't have a good, strong indication what Portugal will do. Maybe it's the case, of course, that you think that Diogo Costa will play. Potentially, it makes more sense to play Diogo Costa. But also, because I've actually not gone for Mittelstadt, I have wanted to sort of cover the German defense by going Manuel Neuer. And actually, overall, the tournament, with how negative, unfortunately, if I'm being honest, how France have played, but mostly because of the way that they're setting up, right? 3 defensive mids, or center mids and defense mids, but all very defensive in nature versus, for example, a team like Netherlands. I can't see them, drastically changing the way that they're going to play. I still think that Saliba is a huge upgrade on their defense. Therefore, I'm going with Maignan as well. And fortunately, of course, both these goalkeepers do not play on the same day. Maignan and Pickford, for example, do play on the same day. So do think about that when you're actually drafting your goalkeepers. I've decided to land on this pairing here. Hopefully with Neuer initially doing the job. Otherwise, of course, we can fall back on Maignan. Keep in mind, of course, the news on Nagelsmann, based on his press conference, is that I think he will not rotate. So if you really like the German players, I think, of course, if it's actually a consideration for you to not use a chip, you can actually consider using your chip instead in the group stage or in the knockout stages, just like myself, for example, where I'm planning to use, of course, the wild card within the later stages. If you're somehow a mythical manager that hasn't used any chips so far, I do think that a sneaky chip strategy has actually come out, particularly because we know that some teams won't rotate, right? Because England won't rotate likely outside of Trent, and because Germany will unlikely rotate too. Same with Belgium. I think if you actually are quite stacked in those sorts of players, you could very well use both the chips within the knockout stages if that's even plausible for you. Although obviously I recognize this video I'm recording quite late, you might have already activated your chip, so it might not be too relevant for you. But obviously, in my case, of course, I am using the Limitless, so it's very different. Now going towards the midfield, I've actually gone for Musiala here, and this was sort of a one-on-one versus Gundo. To me, I think Musiala was definitely someone I wanted to have within my draft. And it was between him and Gundo, and I've just gone with Musiala because I've been very intrigued with how he's played within the tournament. Clearly, you can see both have won man of the match. Musiala has a brace so far within the tournament, at least, within the context of the first 2 games. Gundo has had 1 goal, 1 assist, 1 penalty earned. Could very well still be on penalties. However, based on, for example, a lot of the things that I've looked at, based on what I've watched, both of these players have different routes towards points, right? Musiala, of course, the sort of play style that he exhibits, it is very flary, and it can give you something like man of the match if, let's say, Gundo has a more muted game when it comes to goals and assists. Gundo, however, still continues to make these great in-the-box runs, and you still see him in amazing positions. Musiala, of course, has that sort of additional element where he can do the extraordinary, I suppose, compared to, let's say, Gundo, who just makes a lot of smart runs and gets into smart positions. So I think it's very close between the two. The odds, really, when I looked at market, were very similar for goals and assists, and I really don't think there's too much in between them. I've just gone with Musiala here. I might even flip this towards Gundo. This is the 50-50 for me within this spot. I'm very well unlikely to go double up on Germany, and that's simply because I preferred some of the other midfielders within my draft. So arguably, I suppose the Musiala / Gundo position is one that is something that I could change by the deadline, but right now I'm definitely on Musiala. Now, the non-negotiables for me are Oyarzabal, De Bruyne, and Bellingham. I think Bellingham obviously has really good goal-scoring odds. It's a much easier game when it comes to Slovenia. At the same time, too, with Oyarzabal, just an incredible game. I think he'll start. I really think that he can either play left wing or out of position as a striker. But the most important thing with Oyarzabal is I do think that he has a pretty high chance of actually being the penalty taker, for Spain. So even if someone like Joselu starts, because his penalty record is much inferior, I really think Oyarzabal will take penalties. So on that basis, I'm expecting Oyarzabal to be the best pick. He's also a midfielder, right? So unfortunately, it's tough to access a Spanish midfielder in the game with Ayose being injured. And if Oyarzabal is the only midfielder who starts right now, who's interesting outside of, let's say, Zubimendi and maybe Mikel Merino, I'm going with Oyarzabal just for the attacking phase and obviously just the matchup as well. Now, in terms of Bellingham, as I said, I really like him as well, so he was non-negotiable. And De Bruyne, we just saw the brilliant performance in the previous match. We've always seen De Bruyne as a talisman for Belgium. Nothing has changed so far. He's going to be 100% locked in the team versus Ukraine. Now, the most differential pick, obviously, within my midfield is going to be Szoboszlai. I've carried him for matchday 1, matchday 2, matchday 3. I've always said that I didn't want him to be within my team in matchday 2, but I had bigger fish to fry. I had De Kuyper and I had Mbappe. And unfortunately, I took them out for Kane and I think Juranovic. That hasn't really worked out so far for matchday 2 for myself, but I've decided instead to actually go with Szoboszlai. In this case, because the fixture is just much better. It's technically the best matchup in the group so far for Hungary. When I was watching, for example, Switzerland, Scotland, when I was watching Germany, Scotland, I mean, if anything, Scotland just give a lot of chances away. And I do think Sobo, for this reason, is a very good pick. He is the talisman. I'm very confident that he's still on penalties. We've seen a couple players in this tournament who have expected to take penalties, like Sabitzer, like Kvaratskhelia. Unfortunately not take penalties, but I really am confident with Sobo. So it really was between him and Eriksson based on the previous draft. However, I've landed on Sobo because I just think that the fixture is still a little bit better from the attacking point of view, given how sort of open the games that Scotland allow for them to be are. And then obviously with Mela, the reason why I've gone for him is also because I wanted a little bit of Denmark within my draft. So going back to it, I felt like I've sort of covered myself within those two bases there. As far as the forwards now, this is interesting, right? I think there's a 50-50 with Mbappe. If we get any news towards the end of the deadline that Mbappe is unlikely to start for France, I'm going to immediately move Mbappe to Griezmann. I just think that Poland are definitely a team to target. This is still a game that France have something to play for. We saw news apparently today that Mbappe actually played closed indoors friendly versus a sort of German recreational side. He got 2 goals to assist. That doesn't matter. But the most important thing is that Mbappe is sort of playing football right now, and not just, for example, training individually, but actually, being, I suppose, playing within, quote unquote match conditions. So I do think that Mbappe could very well start, and I'm going to take the punt because I think just Mbappe, if he's able to start, is that interesting as a pick. So he's in the team, and the placeholder clearly is for Griezmann. Kane and Lukaku, once again, because these two teams have something to play for, because I also prefer, for example, Kane to, let's say, Joselu and Ferran, or even Diogo Jota from the Portuguese team, even though Portugal actually have a really nice matchup versus Georgia. And as I said, I like players like Jota, I like players like Neto, and I like players like Dalot, but they haven't made it into the final draft, mostly because I think the attacking fullbacks that I picked are more attacking. And then in the case of the midfielders, I just wanted to pick these players instead ahead of them because I think they're more talismanic for the team. I might be wrong. Neto actually has looked pretty good so far for Portugal within a short stint, and with Leao being suspended, I think Pedro Neto is definitely going to be a punt to look at, but that's pretty much how I've sort of landed right now. As far as, let's say, Kane and Lukaku, once again, going back to it, you saw how many chances Lukaku got again today. I'm happy to sort of take that opportunity once again with Lukaku, even though the matchup is going to be a little bit tougher versus Ukraine. I do think that Ukraine has been pretty susceptible so far. Truben has made a lot of great saves. If you watch back the Slovakia game and the highlights there were definitely chances, and I'm sure Belgium will be able to create more ultimately than, let's say, what Slovakia did within that game. So that's why I've locked in with Lukaku. Obviously, being a penalty taker is very helpful as well. And the same goes with Kane, even though he had subdued minutes versus Denmark. I'm just hoping, of course, slightly better performance for Kane versus Slovenia, and of course with the sort of difference in the quality of the matchups, this is why I've landed on Kane. Now, this is going to be my limitless team selection. I felt like it had nothing to do with my match day 1 and match day 2 teams, so we're going to switch this video up a little bit, and at the end of the video right now, we're just going to do a very quick match day 2 review. Match day 2, I actually ended up getting 79 points. Now, keep in mind, I did not use a wild card. I did not use a limitless for match day 2. So for match day 2, as I said, I got 79 points. The only mistake I probably made was I subbed in Kvaratskhelia for Juranovic, and it didn't really work out very well. Now, obviously, because I had some issues within my team, I also had to keep Sobo within my team. I didn't get to go for a Baumgartner or a Sabitzer, and I've been talking a lot about how I really wanted to transfer them in. Unfortunately, I don't have the opportunity, and I didn't have the opportunity, so that didn't work out so well. I had to keep Rodri because it was just a decision between Juranovic and him. Otherwise, of course, I think the team has done rather well. Now, I don't have KDB. I don't have a single man of the match so far, except for, let's say, Gundo. But I'm happy still with the points that we got. We definitely got a huge rank rise. Anyways, last night, I think the rank so far is top 300,000, so that's not too bad. Hopefully, after today, where I had Bruno, Ronaldo, Lukaku, and unfortunately just the 2 points from Kvaratskhelia, that maybe we'll get a small rank rise. I imagine a lot of people have KDB, so that's not going to be so great for my rank prospects. But I'm looking forward to the fact that hopefully I'll be able to claw some points back by match day 4 and match day 5. And hopefully here, of course, with match day 3 with the limitless in place, that I can enjoy once again a good opportunity to sort of punt on some players that I really like, particularly some Spanish players and particularly also some attacking Spanish players too. So those are my thoughts right now. As I said, right now we have 44 points in match day 1, 79 points in match day 2. That means we have, let's say, 143 points so far within the tournament. Hopefully, of course, we'll continue to do, sorry, not 143 points, but actually 123 points within the tournament so far. So hopefully we'll do much better going forwards. And I'm expecting that we will, because we have chips back. I've seen obviously how strong some chips this week played have done. I think people have gotten, maybe above 90 points as well, which is insane, but it just shows you, of course, how impactful the chips are. I'm hoping, of course, that they will be more impactful for me later down the line in this tournament, but that's really it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful time ahead. Enjoy the games, and we'll see you soon as well for more content. Take care and goodbye.